Ideas shape the world. They give meaning, direction, and possibility. I'm Willie Pietersen, former CEO, Columbia professor, and author of Leadership: The Inside Story, an exploration of the principles that have shaped my leadership journey. Some ideas last for centuries. Others emerge and redefine how we lead. This is Ideas That Matter.
Willie Pietersen, welcome to another episode of Ideas That Matter. Today we're going to be talking about a great topic, a powerful process to create winning strategies. Could you elaborate for us what is a very good or a best practice even in creating winning strategies?
Well, let's start with bad practice, if you like. We can't expect to win unless we know why we lose. So the scorecard here says about 2/3 of executives don't know what their strategy is. And if they don't know what it is, they can't act on it. That's what the research shows us. Now we think about getting it done in an organization so that everybody knows what they have to do on Monday morning. Now, work happens in a multifunctional organization through a shared process. So we've got here a process design issue for strategy creation. Now, we tend to have processes for quality control in our factories. We have it for succession planning. We have a process. But when it comes to strategy, very few companies have a consistent, well-honed process that's simple, easy to master, everybody can follow, and that it creates the right deliverables. What I've noticed, Ted, is that very often when I get called in to help companies to do their strategy, I hear a story something like this. You know, we haven't done a strategy for the last 5 years. I think it's time we do a strategy. Probably a good idea to do a strategy. The world has changed, and we need to refresh our thinking. We don't do succession planning like that every now and again, saying we've got a problem to solve. Let's define a process, or let's do a one-shot solution to it. If we did quality control like that, everything would be out of control. So why should we do strategy like that as an ad hoc, occasional process that you only bring into action when you think you've got a problem to solve? Well, the world is dynamic, and the news for us is you have a problem to solve every single day, which is to adapt to the external needs of the organization. Now, for this, we need a process, a shared process. Work happens through processes. Now, the only way to design a process is to start with the end in mind. What do we want this process to deliver for us? So let's start there. The critical deliverable of any strategy, and I've covered this in previous conversations, is our winning proposition and key priorities for success. As I've mentioned in previous conversations, we need to answer these 3 questions. Who do we seek to serve? How will we win the competition for value creation? What will be our key priorities? Process must help us deliver those outcomes. Second thing a process needs to do is to recognize that the external environment is dynamic. It's not static. So the process must be an iterative learning process with the ability to constantly refresh the answers to those 3 questions. So those are the deliverables that we need to have for any process that we create for strategy. Start with the end in mind, and then make sure we create those deliverables very clearly. You know, if we don't do that, it's a bit like, you know, an athlete wanting to compete in the Olympics and showing up every 4 years without any kind of technique and having not have practiced at all in the intervening time. So the advantage of an iterative, regular process every year is that we constantly are able to do it faster, and we're constantly able to do it better.
Willie, you mentioned that the lifespan of an organization is not its age, but it's a factor of its adaptive capacity, the ability to adapt to a dynamic environment. What, in your mind, is the scorecard on adaptability?
Well, it's alarming. It's very poor. McKinsey did a study, and they discovered in this study, they found that in 1958, the average life expectation of an organization on the S&P 500 was 61 years. Currently, it's 18 years. So companies are dying as teenagers today. So our ability to adapt has declined very badly. And there's a very dire need to correct for this. If we just think about the corporate casualties for a minute, just to step back and think about this, we sometimes forget. General Motors went insolvent because of their inability to adapt. And they had to be rescued by the US government. Sears Roebuck was a great icon. The great, ability to mail order business was invented by Sears Roebuck. The moment the railway system was established in the USA, Sears Roebuck jumped on the opportunity there for mail ordering and delivery through the railroad system. That company doesn't exist anymore. It's bankrupt. K-Mart went bankrupt as well. Kodak, a spectacular example of a company that went bankrupt because it was overtaken by digital photography. Well, we ask ourselves the question, oh, yes, that's understandable. Who invented digital photography? The answer is Kodak did. They were overcome and defeated by their own technology. So this explains to us why we have these massive failures. We come back to Peter Drucker's wisdom, is the inability to recognize the changes in the external environment and to adapt to them. There was a wonderful guy called Arie de Geus, who was the head of Shell's planning system, wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review, I think it was 1997. And the title of the article was wonderful. It was called The Living Company. And in it, he made a very prescient comment that always rings in my mind. And in it, he said, in future, an organization's only sustainable competitive advantage will be its ability to learn faster than its competitors. Now, I think this has come full circle from 1997 and become a burning reality in today's disruptive environment. The ability to learn faster than our competitors. Now, that's not going to happen through exhortation. You can't run up and down the corridors of your organization and say to people, you got to learn. You got to learn faster. You got to give them a technique, the ability to do that. And it's learning with a purpose. I mean, what are you going to learn? Gardening, knitting, whatever it is. You've got to learn purposefully. It's called strategic learning. The ability then to understand the external environment and adapt accordingly. So this is purely Darwinian in terms of an imperative. And the lifespan of organizations is not a factor of its age. It's a factor of its adaptive capacity. And adaptation in human societies, organizations, comes from learning. It doesn't just happen by accident. So our ability to learn faster, as Arie de Geus said, is the key. So the process that I've designed, which is called strategic learning, takes that into account, that it needs to be a learning system that enables organizations to continuously learn and renew their strategies in response to the changing external environment. I think that's the imperative. Doing it regularly and getting better at it.
Could you walk us through the sequence that you have for strategic learning?
Yes, certainly. It has 4 steps. Learn, through doing a situation analysis into the external environment and our own realities. Step 1. Step 2, focus by defining how you will win and what your key priorities will be. That's the focus step. Third step is align. By aligning all the elements of your business system, all your activities, the passions of your people, behind your winning proposition, behind the focus step. It's the alignment step. Then the execution step is apply the strategy. Do lots of experiments and other things that might work. Experiment your way forward, learn your way forward. Execute through superior planning systems. That's where planning comes into play. But that's a managerial task, being good at operational planning. Then we loop back to the learn step when we next do a strategy. And we ask ourselves 2 questions. Through our own actions, what worked, what didn't, and why? How can we do better next time? Second question, how has the external environment changed that calls upon us to change what we do in response so we continue creating superior value? That's then an iterative cycle. And the learning loop is just as important as the individual steps. None of these steps works in isolation from the others. They build on each other as a total system of learning and renewal. Now, there's kind of a rule of sequencing here. Always start with the learn step, never anywhere else. Whenever you want to do a strategy, start with a situation analysis. Look out of the window first, then look in the mirror. That's the rule of the road. Always do that, just the external environment first. So intelligence precedes operations, and structure follows strategy. So in all successful military operations, it's the intelligence system that guides all of the activities that follow. And when that intelligence system breaks down, the activities go wrong. I can think of 2 examples where we had catastrophic results from poor intelligence. Nothing's perfect, and we have to keep learning about how to do it better. But the first one was in 9/11. It was a catastrophic event of these planes crashing into buildings, killing 3,000 people. We were all taken by surprise. This was studied by the commission afterwards. And one of the findings was really astounding, is that all the information about what was likely to happen already existed, but it existed in different parts of the intelligence system and was never integrated into one coherent set of findings. In other words, we knew in advance, but the information was fragmented and not integrated. Failure of intelligence, big learning. And the whole of the intelligence system was redesigned in the USA in response to that find. The second failure of intelligence in the military sphere that I can think about was the Iraq War, where the intelligence suggested very strongly that Iraq had nuclear weapons. That information was false. That premise for invading Iraq was false. We know that now. That's a fact. But, question is, what have we learned from that? But these mistakes can be devastating. And it was Sun Tzu, the Chinese military thinker, who in fact said, the most successful wars are won before a single shot is fired. It's all based on superior intelligence work. So that is the key thing, starting with the intelligence system that informs all the subsequent steps.
Your strategic learning process is very interesting. Could you maybe walk us through an example, maybe in healthcare, where we can actually demonstrate its use?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually very similar to the scientific method, number one, where you start with an hypothesis and then you test whether or not it's true, and then you keep learning your way forward until you find ultimate truth. So science is truth found out. And in many ways, so is strategy. Truth found out, right? That determines your actions. I happen to do an annual set of seminars with the medical establishment here in New York, Columbia Presbyterian Hospital System. And I find that a very inspiring session because of the quality of the work they do. And these people are very mission-driven, do wonderful work. And it's very striking to me that when I present the strategic learning cycle, that the response from them is, this is exactly the way the healthcare system works. You start with an accurate diagnosis. Without an accurate diagnosis, there's no hope of a cure. That's the situation analysis. We do that too. And we have to get better and better and better at diagnosis. Otherwise, nothing else works. Situation analysis. Focus step. Now you prescribe the cure. That's your winning proposition. When we prescribe the cure, that's a winning proposition. Your alignment system is now we devise the treatment plan. That's how we align the activities, the dosages, the medications, the behavioral changes to the winning proposition, which is the cure. Now, the implementation step is now we apply the remedies, and the learning loop comes back. We ask the patient to come back in a month, whatever the period might be. How's it working? And if it's not working, we adjust accordingly. So the learning loop is crucial for us as well. Same 4 steps. Science, the same thing. So it's not as if this is in some way a totally unique way of thinking about things. It's taking existing wisdom, existing methods that drive forward our knowledge and inform our behavior and help us to learn more effectively and apply that to doing brilliant strategy work. Now, it's been applied in a very large number of significantly large global organizations, and also in the not-for-profit world, Girl Scouts of America, National Institutes on Aging. They asked me to do that. I said, I'm a perfect match for what you want to do. National Institute on Aging. But, those are just 2 examples of, and there have been a number of others. And exactly the same thing applies in terms of learning their way forward, creating superior value compared with the alternatives available to people. And it's turned out to work pretty well, generally speaking.
You mentioned the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. Small little aside, I could tell now of your impact on the hospital simply because years ago, my wife and kids took my mother to New York City for the Thanksgiving Day parade. Well, she never made the parade because she had a heart attack that morning in the hotel. She was taken to Columbia Presbyterian, and I can't say enough of good things of what they've done and what they did. And she lived an additional 10 years after that. But Friday night, about 9 o'clock at night, I got a call in the hotel room from a doctor just explaining everything again to me, asking if there's any other questions. So I would say I now can see your fingerprints on that. Thank you, Willie. Last question that I have is, what is it that, what's the key driver of success in implementing what we're talking about here and putting that strategic learning process in place and helping that guide the winning proposition?
We have to understand that this is not a mechanical process. It's not a question of just checking the boxes. It's understanding that we're following a logical way of thinking and acting and renewing that thinking. So it's a way of thinking as much as it is anything else that informs our way of behaving, way of thinking. And I remember very well in a program that I ran on strategic learning, and there was a global group, people from various companies. And in the back row, actually, was a woman from British Telecom. And I remember her very well because she was a very formidable presence in the room. And I said, let's start with finding out about the issues on your minds, et cetera, and talk about those. And she actually got out of her seat, and she pointed at me rather aggressively, I might say. And so I've come here to learn about strategic learning, your methodology. Does it work? I was rather taken aback by this rather threatening question. Almost so, if it doesn't work, I'm leaving now. And I gave her an answer, which was adequate, but it took me a little bit off guard. And overnight, I thought a little bit more clearly about the answer. And next morning, I said, I've thought about your question. Good questions help us think more clearly. And I think I can give you a better answer now. It works if you make it work. It's all about leadership effectiveness. It doesn't work on its own like a clockwork mouse. It works if you make it work. That means you have to be committed to making it work. And it's committed to getting teams on board to help you make it work. It's got to be a collective endeavor. If you just do it on your own and tell people what to do, they're not going to follow you. Participation, involvement is magic. Getting them involved in it. This is a leadership process. If you look at the heading of strategic learning, it says leadership process, strategic learning. And I said, so the process alone is not a magic bullet. You are the magic bullet. Hi, I'm Willie Pietersen. Leadership is not about wielding power. It's about authenticity and inspiring others to achieve a shared purpose. Excelling as a leader is a continuous journey of pursuing ideas that matter as the environment shifts and new challenges emerge. Thank you for watching. Please share your ideas by leaving your comments below. We learn best when we learn together. And if you've enjoyed this discussion, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Thank you again.